Hello, dear chess fans. My name is Eugene Grinis. Welcome to my free chess school, from beginners to advanced, open for everyone who want to improve own game. This video is intended for the beginners. No game is lost without a mistake being made, be it a blunder or a slight inaccuracy or an error in the calculation of variation or in the assessment of a position. In this video we will be dealing with mistakes which are committed in the initial stages of a game. We will dwell on errors which involve a breaking of the basic principles of opening play. Our attention will be mainly devoted to typical tactical mistakes and their consequences. There are some practical opening rules for beginners which are usually worth remembering. These rules are: 1. Open with either the e-pawn, e4 or the d-pawn, d4. 2. Wherever possible, make a good developing move which threatens something. 3. Develop knights before bishops. 4. Pick the most suitable square for a piece and develop it there once and for all. 5. Make one or two pawn moves in the opening, not more. 6. Do not bring your queen out early. 7. Castle as soon as possible, preferably on the king's side. 8. Play to get control of the center. 9. Always try to maintain at least one pawn in the center. 10. Do not sacrifice without a clear reason. 11. Complete your development before you attack. 12. Pay attention to your opponent's moves. 13. Avoid exchanging bishops for knights. And rule number 14, fight for space. Any move which is in accordance with the basic principle is normal. Any move which is not is abnormal. So a move which helps neither development nor the center is abnormal. Move which does not affect the centers is abnormal. Now let's take a look at the following game. d4, knight f6, developing the knight towards the center. Knight f3, developing the knight towards the center. c5, attacking white's central pawn. Bishop f4, developing the bishop, but this is not a good move. White ignores black's threat. Better is d5, gaining space. Bishop f4 was played. c takes d4, eliminating white's central pawn. Knight takes pawn on d4. This is already a blunder. White should play queen takes pawn on d4, bringing queen out too early, rule number 6, and gaining black a tempo for knight c6, attacking the queen. The position would be equal. Let's go back to the game. Knight takes pawn on d4. Can you find black's next move? Please pause the video. Black plays e5, forking knight and bishop. But what is black's idea? Bishop takes pawn on e5. What now? Can you find black's next move? Please pause the video. Queen a5 check. The second double attack with the queen, winning the bishop on e5. Knight d2, queen takes bishop on e5. Black is winning. Now let's take a look at the following beginner's game. e4, b6. Do you know the name of this opening? This is the Owen's defense. This opening is not recommended for beginners. Bishop c4, developing the bishop to the strong diagonal. Bishop b7, attacking the e4 pawn. This is called fianchetto. Queen f3, threatening checkmate in 1 on f7. Knight f6, knight h3, developing the knight to the edge of the board. Bishop takes pawn on e4. Black is happy to win a pawn. Better is e6, and the position is even. Bishop takes pawn on e4. How would you continue as white in this position? Please pause the video. In the game, white plays knight g5. This is a trap. The right continuation is bishop takes pawn on f7 check. The bishop has to be taken. Knight g5 check, knight fork, king g8, knight takes bishop on e4. Material is equal, but white has a better position. Let's go back to the game. Knight g5. Black falls into the trap and takes the queen. This is a blunder. Black has paid no attention to his opponent's moves. Rule number 12. d5 was the only move attacking white's bishop on c4 and covering the bishop on e4. For example, knight takes bishop on e4, knight takes knight with an equal position. After black's blunder, white checkmated in 1 with bishop takes pawn on f7, checkmate. The bishop cannot be taken since it is covered by the knight on g5. Smothered mate with a bishop. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, e5, knight f3, attacking the e5 pawn, knight f6. Black doesn't cover the e5 pawn, but attacks the e4 pawn himself. Do you know the name of the opening? This is the Petrov's defense. Knight takes pawn on e5, knight takes pawn on e4. This is a mistake. The correct move is d6, attacking the knight on e5 first, and only after knight f3, knight takes pawn on e4. For example, queen e2, pinning the knight, queen e7, unpinning, d3, knight f6, and black is okay here. Let's go back to the game. Knight takes e4, queen e2, attacking the knight on e4, knight f6. This is a huge mistake. Better is queen e7. Queen takes knight on e4, d6. The white knight is pinned to the queen and cannot move. d4, defending the knight, pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn on e5. White is a pawn up here. Let's go back to the game. Knight f6. Can you find white's next move in this position? Please pause the video. Now, knight c6 check. Discovered check. White wins the black queen. This is a famous opening trap in Petrov's defense worth remembering. For example, queen e7, knight takes queen, bishop takes knight on e7, knight c3, and white has a queen for a knight, winning. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, e5, knight f3, developing the knight and attacking the e5 pawn, d6, covering the e5 pawn with a pawn. Do you know the name of the opening? This is the Philidor Defence. Bishop c4, developing the bishop to a strong diagonal. Bishop g4, developing the bishop and pinning the knight on f3. If knight f6, developing the knight, then knight g5 can follow. Bishop g6 was played. c3, knight c6, queen to b3, good move, and black takes the knight on f3, bishop takes knight. This is a blunder. It was necessary to play knight a5. Bishop takes pawn on f7, check, king e7, queen a4, king takes bishop on f7, queen takes knight. White is a pawn up. Let's go back to the game. Bishop takes knight. Can you find mate in 2 in this position? Please pause the video. Bishop takes pawn on f7, check. King to e7. If king to d7, then queen e6, checkmate. After king e7 follows queen e6, checkmate. Mate with queen and bishop. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, c6. Do you know the name of the opening? This is the Caro-Kann Defence. d4, d5, attacking the pawn on e4. Knight c3, developing the knight and defending the e4 pawn. Pawn takes pawn on e4, knight takes on e4. Knight to d7. Black wants to play knight g to f6, attacking white's knight on e4. Queen e2. This is not a good move, since the queen is hindering the bishop f1 from developing. It is better to develop knights and bishop first, rule number 6. But this move is a trap, and black falls into it. Knight g to f6. In this position, this move is losing the game. Rule number 12 says, pay attention to your opponent's moves. Better is e6. But knight g to f6 was played. Can you find the checkmate in 1 in this position? Please pause the video. Knight d6, checkmate. Smothered mate. The e7 pawn cannot take the knight, since it is pinned to the king by white's queen. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, g6, d4, bishop g7. This is called a fianchetto. Do you know the name of the opening? This is the modern defense. Knight f3, developing the knight, d6, bishop c4, developing the bishop on the active diagonal, knight d7. This is a huge mistake, allowing bishop takes pawn on f7, check. King takes bishop. If king f8, then knight to g5, knight d to f6, knight e6, check, bishop takes knight on e6, bishop takes bishop, knight takes pawn on e4, queen f3, check, knight e to f6, queen takes pawn on b7. White has an extra pawn and a great position. Let's go back to the game. King takes bishop. Knight g5, check. King e8. After king to f6, can you find mate in 1 in this position? Please pause the video. Queen f3, checkmate. After king to f8, can you find white's next move in this position? Please pause the video. Knight e6, check, forking the king and the queen. For example, king e8, knight takes queen, king takes knight. White is winning due to his material advantage. Let's go back to the game. King to e8 was played. Can you find the next move for white in this position? Please pause the video. Knight to e6, trapping the black queen and winning the game. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, e5, bishop c4, developing the bishop to the strong diagonal. What is the name of this opening? The bishop's opening. Knight f6, developing the knight. Knight f3. Knight takes pawn on e4. Knight c3. This is a gambit. White sacrifices a pawn for a quick development. Knight takes knight. Pawn d takes knight on c3. Opening lines for the queen and the bishop. d6. This is already a mistake. White castles. This is not the best move. The best continuation is knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn. For example, f5, knight f7, knight fork, queen h4, attacking the bishop on c4. And you have to see this threat as white. Queen e2, rook g8. What now? Knight takes pawn on e5, attacking the rook on g8 with the bishop. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn on e5, check. Bishop e7. Bishop takes rook on g8. And white has a great material advantage. Let's go back to the game. White castles. Bishop g4, pinning the knight to the queen. But this is a huge mistake. Black should play bishop e7, developing the bishop. For example, bishop e3, castles, with a good position for black. Let's go back to the game. Bishop g4 was played. White plays. Knight takes pawn on e5, sacrificing the queen. Bishop takes queen. Now, can you find mate in 2 in this position? Please pause the video. Excellent. Bishop takes pawn on f7 check. King to e7, the only move. Bishop g5 checkmate. If after knight takes e5, black doesn't take the queen and plays pawn takes knight. White doesn't take the bishop on g4 with the queen, but plays bishop takes pawn on f7 check, deflecting the king from the queen. King to e7. If king takes bishop, then queen takes queen, winning. After king to e7, white plays bishop g5 check. Now the king has to take the bishop on f7. King takes bishop, queen takes queen, and white wins. Let's take a look at the following beginner game. e4, c5. What is the name of this opening? This is the Sicilian Defence. Knight f3, developing the knight. Knight c6, d4, pawn takes pawn on d4, knight takes on d4. Black plays e5, attacking the knight on d4. This is the Kalashnikov Variation of the Sicilian Defence. Knight f5. This is not the best move in this position. Knight to b5 is better. Knight f5. Knight g to e7. Black should play d5 with an equal position. Knight g to e7 was played. This is a huge mistake from black. Can you find the best continuation for white in this position? Please pause the video. Excellent. Knight d6, checkmate. A smothered mate. Now let's take a look at the last game for today. e4, e5, f4. What is the name of this opening? This is the King's Gambit. Pawn takes pawn on f4. King's Gambit accepted. Knight f3, developing the knight. d5, attacking the e4 pawn. Knight c3. Pawn takes pawn on e4. Knight takes pawn. Bishop g4, pinning the knight. Queen e2. What is white's threat? Black plays bishop takes knight, attacking the queen. This is a blunder. Black should play bishop e7 with good position. Bishop takes knight. After black's mistake, can you find the best continuation for white in this position? Please pause the video. White plays knight f6, checkmate. A double check and mate, since black's king has no escape. Okay, that's the lesson for today from the Eugene Grinis Chess School. I hope it was useful and you enjoyed it. If so, push likes, subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave comments. Thanks for donations to my YouTube channel. You can find a corresponding link in the video description. And the last question for today. Can you find the Easter egg in this video? It is of course about viewing of video online on YouTube. Only then it is possible for you to open the description and to look for the words Easter egg. It is also possible to look what new appears in the last 10 seconds of the video, paying attention to Easter egg. Goodbye.